Hello everyone, welcome back to my channel. Today's card is a really sweet Christmas card and I'm trying to get it in on time for the current Lawnfawnatics challenge. They're up to challenge 111 and I never get enough of these challenges in. I always seem to find out about what the theme is at the last minute. I'm never organized enough for them, but this time I think I am. I had so many ideas. As it's coffee, tea and treats, and that is right up my alley. That sounds like the perfect afternoon for me. I wrote down all of my ideas and this is the one that I settled on. I really wanted to play with some stencil paste. So today I'm mixing my white stencil paste with some Distress Oxide ink. I haven't done this before, this is very new, but it's something I've been wanting to give a go since I bought my white stencil paste. I thought I'd go with white so that it would be opaque and I would see if I could add colours to it. So here I am adding tea dye to my stencil paste, mixing it in. It did really well. It didn't seem to affect the consistency or anything. Like always though, I do recommend that you wash this stuff off everything immediately. It does dry fairly quickly, so I have to wash it off my little spatula, my stencils, because it just gets stuck on everything. Once that had dried, my cardstock actually curled a little bit. I don't know if it was just a mix of the weather, the amount of the stencil paste that was on my piece of cardstock, I'm really not sure. But it's just something to note when you use this, it might curl your paper up. I was able to fix this by popping it under something heavy and by sticking it down onto my card base with some really strong tape. I added some sprinkles of that tea dye, Distress Oxide ink all over, some around the edges to fill in the white gaps, and I also added some of my copper watercolor pigment. Now it's time to get stamping, which is usually what I do first, but I've done things a bit out of order with this one because I really wanted my background to dry. So I'm just going through all the stamps that I thought I would use for this. My little favourite mice are coming back. I've got some cookies, a mug, a cookie jar, a little container for sprinkles, a piping bag, just things you would see when baking cookies. So I guess what I'm aiming for with this card is that there's 3 little scenes on it and they're kind of in order. So there's the little mice baking the cookies all set up for Santa with a little letter, and then the bottom one is a plate empty with little crumbs and my cheeky little mouse is getting up to trouble again, falling into the cookie jar. Because I'm using the same images over again, I did have to stamp the same things over and over again for all these little scenes. So I did end up with a few extra cookies. I thought I would just stamp them and see what I can fit. But these scenes are so tiny, and for them today I'm using my stitched scallop tag set. I can't remember what it is. It's the gift tag set. I've used them for birthday badges in the past. They're a really good size for the Slimline cards because you can fit 3 really nicely on the front. But as I mentioned, they're very small, so I had to be a little bit picky about what I could fit on each of those tiny scenes. Today I'm colouring, as always, with a mix of Copic markers and my regular alcohol markers, using 2 shades in each area and blending them together. My little mice, as always, are going to be grey. And you'll see as I'm colouring in today, my R20 Copic marker is dry. It has run out. I'm having trouble finding somewhere that sells all 4 of the Copic refills that I need. I think I may have finally found somewhere. For some reason, the E Copic refills are a bit tricky to find. I need like an E11, an E00, and there's another one. I think it might be an E13. They must be very popular. They're fantastic skin tones. They're perfect cookie tones. I use them almost every card and I'm really missing the ones that have been dried out for a little while. But now to have the colour that I use for my little mice on their noses and their cheeks, I need to hurry up and get this replaced. I'm going with a very simple colour scheme for this card. I really like the idea of using red, but I also wanted to soften up the front of the card. I had cut the scalloped circles out in red and it was just a little bit too bold, so I added pink to my colour scheme. I've got tiny pops of green in there just for something a little bit different, but I feel like it's a fairly soft colour scheme overall. So while I'm colouring in this mug, you can see that I'm struggling with my Copic. It is just truly on its way out. For some reason I got way ahead of myself and started cutting out before I added my jelly rolls, so I'll come back to them after I trim these out. I find it much easier to do my white highlights when everything is still on the one piece of cardstock rather than having to hold all of them, but I just couldn't go past not adding my white details. So today I'm using my size 0.8 and my nice and juicy size 1 for my bigger images. I wasn't quite sure what I wanted to do with these cookies, but I knew I also wanted to add some stencil paste. But first I coloured them in green because I did want the icing on these to be green, and I really didn't know what the effect would be like with the stencil paste. So I've done my cookies, I've added the white highlights, and I've chopped up with my X-Acto knife some little heart polymer clay sprinkles. I didn't have any Christmas coloured sprinkles or really tiny shaker elements, so I've just chopped up a few little hearts. I've added some of my Twisted Citron Distress Oxide ink to my little stamping platform here, and I've added my white stencil paste. I'm giving it a good mix because I want the colour to be fairly consistent. I don't want any white blobs in there. And then I'm just going to brush it on to my cookies. This is like highly experimental. I didn't know what this would turn out like. I'm hoping that it turned out okay and that it looks good in the final result. Really just hoping for the best. And hoping that I might be able to use this in other ways in future cards. So I just made sure that I was covering that area nicely, fairly evenly if possible. I didn't want to leave any brush strokes in there, so I'm trying to make it look like icing that's been spread on a cookie. And while it's still wet, I'm adding those little sprinkles so that they can get set in there nicely. So here is that die that I was talking about earlier, that tag die. So I've cut both the scallop circle and the plain stitch circle, and I'm going to be sticking some white plain circles over my pink scalloped circles. I'm lining up the hole. I just feel like that's the easiest way to do this. I know that they're going to be covered up, but I feel like it just ensured that everything was even and placed well. And once they were done, I could get started on playing around with my scenes. I'm using my X-Acto knife to cut a little hole in my cookie jar, and that is because my favourite little mouse, who falls into something in every card that I use him in, is going to have his little legs and tiny bum sticking out of this cookie jar. Maybe he's reached in a little too far for the last one and fallen in. And now I'm just going to be setting my little scenes, making sure that the plate in each scene is covering up that hole. I added some wide and fairly strong double-sided tape to the back of this card front in hopes that it does flatten it out a bit better. It did pretty good. I feel like there's only a couple of bumps in it. That's just something I have to remember for next time I use this much paste on a piece of cardstock. So once my double-sided tape is done, I remove the backing on this and then I'm going to adhere it to a card base. Today I'm using a uniquely creative card base that I got from Hobby Hoppers. I love that these Slimline cards are pre-cut and scored and everything because I have been using a lot of cardstock making my own, so it's just nice to have them finished. I'm also using, by the same brand, Uniquely Creative, I'm using their foam squares on the back of these. I really wanted to add some dimension. I feel like the brick wall gave a lot of good texture, but having these flat on it still would have looked really flat, so I wanted to raise them up. These foam squares are fantastic. I'm having no trouble ripping the backing off this one like I do with most of my other mini foam squares. They just do the job perfectly. Once I had all my foam on the back, it was then time to line these up and then press them all down into place. I also needed a sentiment on the front of this card, and I don't think anything's better than the sentiment that comes with the cookies: peace, love, joy. And then on this other little banner I'm going to have "and cookies." So I'm stamping them on some red cardstock with my embossing ink and using some white embossing powder for them. I felt like this background still needed a little bit more, it wasn't finished yet. So I stamped, coloured and cut a bunch of these cute little embellishments from my Winter Messages stamp set, and I'm just going to be adding them around my circles. And once they're all stuck down, this card is complete. I hope you love it. I'd love to know what you think of it. And are you entering this challenge too? I can't wait to see what everyone makes. They're always so much fun. Thank you so much for watching. Bye for now.